We last evening looked at the outline of the book, and I suggested to you that the first main division is chapter 1:1 to 3:5, Where is the God of Justice? We said that the first subdivision is just the first verse, the introduction, the address, or the more technical title, if you want to be an Old Testament scholar, superscription. Well, I'm tempted to say a thing about that, but I won't. The next subdivision is the first chapter, and that's what we looked at last night. God loves, but He is not served. And we saw that that was divided into two paragraphs, 1:2 to 5, I love you. God's statement to them. And their statement to Him in verses 6 to 14 is, you're not worth it. You're not worth my best. You're just God. You're not worth it. Well, then that raises the question, what happened? And that brings us to the second chapter. Now, I've called it Three Broken Covenants, and we'll see why in just a moment. But the question is, why have they fallen into this kind of an attitude? Why have they fallen into this kind of behavior of saying, God's not worth my best? Well, the answer is that they have fallen into a pagan way of thinking. Now, sometimes we think of pagan as nasty. No, it's just a non-Christian way of thinking. I enjoy saying to my students, there are only two worldviews, the biblical one and the other one. And shorthand for the other one is pagan. So what is that anyway? If you want to be a pagan thinker, the first question you ask is, how can I achieve a maximum of comfort, security, and pleasure for myself? That's it. That's what life is about. How can I achieve a maximum of comfort, security, and pleasure for myself? If you start out that way, you're in big trouble. But everybody starts out that way. So we're all in big trouble. Well, so then how do I do that? And the answer is, I have to find out where the power is. If comfort, security, and pleasure is what you're in this thing for, then the question is, where's the power? And if you look at politics of all sorts, you discover that's what it's about. How do I get hold of the handles of power to get what I want? Because I'll tell you this, baby, powerlessness is nothing. Power is it. Get hold of it, do it, make yourself comfortable, secure, and full of pleasure. Well, the answer is, I do the minimum that's necessary to capture that power for myself. Now that's economics. Cost-benefit analysis. We buy a car, we don't say, hey, I'd like to spend the most money possible for this car. No, we say, I want to spend the least money possible. I want to get the maximum benefit for the least cost. So, I want the maximum result. I want the maximum payoff. I want maximum comfort, maximum security, maximum pleasure. And I want to expend the minimum possible to get the power to do that. In other words, I serve the power source, God, to get. That's paganism. Around the world, that's paganism. I figure out, okay, Baal is the power source. What's the minimum I have to do for Baal? Baal here, he wants 3 meals a day, but I think I can get him to give me what I want for 2 meals a day. Baal, he wants a Hart, Schaffner, and Marx suit. But I say, McRae's is good enough for you. Now, if he won't produce, if he won't give me what I want, I may have to go to Hart, Schaffner, and Marx. But if I can get away with McRae's, I'll do it. Because, why am I in this? I'm in this to make Baal bless me. I love the story that some missionary friends told. Their cook was not a Christian believer. And she had a little idol in the kitchen. And they said, that's okay. That's okay. One day, though, they came home, and the idol was out on the back porch, and it was pouring rain. And they said, why is your God out in the rain? She said, I told him. I told him, I need this, and I need it now, and if you don't get it, you go out in the rain. It's his own fault. They had fallen into a pagan way of thinking. I will do the minimum necessary to get the maximum result out of God. My God is a blessing machine. And I will crank the blessing machine just as hard as I need to, but no harder, in order to get it to produce. Well, there's a problem with that. Whoops. One problem is that it looks like I poured water on the... God cannot be manipulated. You see, paganism says the gods are part of this world. That's a very important aspect of it. And I can manipulate this world and therefore get what I want. This is what voodoo is based on. You know, I try not to tell this to my students. But you know, voodoo makes the little image, and you follow your enemy around and maybe get a hair. With me, that's a little difficult, but it's easier to get a fingernail clipping, and you stick it on this little image, and the image is me. So, you don't want me to give you a test tomorrow? You stick a hat pin in its stomach, and I get a stomach ache, and I don't come to class, and you're all right. So, if the gods are part of this world, you can manipulate them. You can make them do what you want. Bad news. Bad news. God's not part of the world. God's the creator. He's other than the world. And you can stick pins in things all you want to, and it's not going to bother God in the least. This God can't be manipulated. You can't make him do what you want by giving him more sheep. You can't make him do what you want by building him a bigger house. I love the psalm where he says, if I were hungry, would I ask you? I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. If I want roast beef, I can have it 24 hours a day. You can't manipulate God. So what happens then is, well, God's not paying off. So I serve him less. That's what has happened to them. They've fallen into the pagan way of thinking. Now, we got to ask the next question. Doesn't God want to bless us? Doesn't God want to give us comfort and security and pleasure? Does God want us to be comfortless and insecure and hurting? No. No. He wants to bless us more than we know. It's so significant that the first thing God does in Genesis 1, after he makes Adam and Eve, is, and he blessed them. That's our God. Our God longs to pour out good things upon us. God longs to give us joy and gladness. He longs to do that. The problem's not with him, the problem's with us. We keep putting a plug in the blessing pipe. And God is pouring them out, and we keep plugging the pipe. Because you see, there is only one way to open that pipe, if I may put it so crassly. And that is Abraham's way. Abraham, I'd like to give you a piece of land. I'd like to give you a baby. I'd like to give you a reputation. Man, there's nothing spiritual about that at all. He doesn't say, I want to forgive you. He doesn't want to say, I want to cleanse you from your sins. He doesn't say, I want to take you to heaven. He says, I want to give you a piece of land, a baby, and a reputation. Well, I'll tell you what. There's nothing spiritual about land when it's under your fingernails. And there's nothing spiritual about a baby at 2 o'clock in the morning with a full diaper. And reputation, we're supposed to give that up, aren't we? What's God doing? Abraham, I know what you want. I know what you long for. An old man, not far from the end, and it looks like it's all been for nothing. I know your heart. Would you let me give you the things you long for? I think all the angels held their breath. What do you think, Gabriel? Will he do it? Will he trust God? And Gabriel says, I don't know. The last 25 people he put this offer to didn't do it. I really wonder how many people God gave this offer to before he got a taker. Because you see, there's just one hitch. You've got to leave what you know, what you love, what you're comfortable with, and go get it. Why does God do that? This is what the covenant is about. God offers the very things we need. I'll be your God. And in return, he asks for exclusive devotion expressed in godlike behavior. You're it, God. You are my God. No matter what you do, if you choose to do it my way, you're my God. If you choose to do it some other way, you're my God. I'm going to walk with you. Now again, it's fascinating how very gently God brought the people into this. He doesn't ask at the outset for this kind of exclusive devotion. All he asks of Abraham is, would you be willing to come and get it? That's all he asks. With a Jacob. Man, Jacob, the old trickster, running from the results of his trickery, finds a likely looking rock, props his head on it, and goes off to sleep like a baby. Tough guy. God shows up in a dream. Says, Jacob, I'm going to bless you. Jacob wakes up in the morning. He says, man, God was here and I didn't know it. The world is that way. He keeps sneaking up on us. God, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If you keep your promises, I'll give you a cut. Boy, is Jacob fortunate I wasn't God at that moment. You don't talk to God like that. As a matter of fact, yes you do. God doesn't have any pride. Will you let me be your God? Okay. What do I have to do? Why does God ask this anyway? Why does God ask for exclusive devotion expressed in surrender and trust? It's because of the human problem. What's the human problem? I'm God. That's the problem. Every one of us children of Adam and Eve does the very same thing. Who's most important in my life? Me. Who supplies my needs? Me. Who decides what my needs are? Me. Who decides what's right for me and what's wrong for me? Me. Now, that's very nice, except there's a problem with that. It's not true. I love a poster I saw some years ago. It says there are 2 steps to enlightenment. Number 1, there is a God. Number 2, He's not you. That's it. Some of you may remember algebra. Some of you are delighted to have forgotten it. But you know, in algebra, the idea is to get the 2 sides of the equation to balance. But if you leave out one crucial factor, it'll never balance, no matter what you do to it. And that's what the world is trying to do. We're trying to make things work with one crucial element left out. He's God. And so, whenever God shows up and He says, John, here's what I want to do for you. I say, well, I don't know about that. I like this part, but I don't like that part. No, Who's in charge there? Numero uno. And so God says, here it is. Will you let me be God? Will you dare to let me? Some of you have seen the Indiana Jones movie. I always forget what the title is. I think maybe it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I don't know. But you remember he comes to this gulf. He's got to get to the other side. How's he going to do it? And he remembers what somebody told him. The just shall live by faith. I don't know how that got in that movie, but there it is. And he says, all right. And as he steps, suddenly he sees what he had not seen before. There's a bridge across there. But he could not see it until he took the step. That's good religion. That's good religion. And that's what the people of Malachi's day were not willing to do. No. You prove to me that you're going to give me those blessings, and I'll decide whether I want to walk across there or not. Doesn't happen that way. It can't happen that way. There's got to come that place where you and I, and it'll be different in your life from my life, but that place where you and I say, all right, I'm going to let you be God. I'm going to let you do it your way. Because we have to reverse what happened in the garden. God's not on your side. God doesn't want you to have that fruit. God doesn't want you to be wise. God doesn't want you to have that good flavor. God doesn't want you to have that beauty. No, God wants to deprive you. Folks, that's straight from hell. God is not for you. God's not on your side. God doesn't want good things for you. That's a lie. So that's where we got to start. And when Abraham went back home and said, Sarah, let's pack the donkey. She said, why? He said, we're leaving. Oh, yeah? Well, that's probably a good thing. Where are we going? I don't know. What? All the angels went, there's hope. And then we have to believe that He knows my needs better than I do. That what He says is true. See, they didn't trust God, so they were willing to listen when the snake said, God's lying. You won't really die. And so there came that night when Abraham heard God say, your reward is going to be very great. And Abraham knew God so well, he could say, come on, God, get real. That's the Living Oswalt version, but that's the point. Come on, God. It's been 15 years now. You haven't given me this baby you're talking about. I don't actually own any of this land that you say is mine. I'm going to die, and my servant is going to inherit everything I've got. Quit talking about rewards. And God says, come out here a minute. Would you count the stars for me, please? 1, 2, 3. God, this is crazy. Nobody can count the stars. Yes, and your children are going to be more than the stars of the heaven. Do you believe me? And all the angels went. Adam and Eve didn't believe him. And death rules the world. Do you think Abraham will believe a nutty thing like that? And that's as nutty as saying your eternal destiny depends on what you do with a 33-year-old Israelite who died 2,000 years ago. That's crazy. And Abraham believed God. And all the angels went, wow, he did it. There's hope. Does God know your needs better than you do? Are you telling God what you need and expecting Him to produce? Or are you saying, oh Lord, you show me what I need? And of course, He has. But it's not over yet. Adam and Eve wouldn't trust God. They didn't really believe He wanted the best for them. And so they didn't believe what He said when He said they would die. And so they didn't do what He said. Did Abraham want Isaac? No. He wanted Abraham. Excuse me. Sorry. Did God want Isaac? No. He wanted Abraham. And so there came the day when that baby was born. And God said, "May I have him, please?" What? No! No, you promised. This is what I got in this racket for. I've got what I came for. Now you go peddle your papers. I got the blessing. That's what I got in this for. Now you go away and leave me alone. And all the angels held their breath. And I believe the Bible. I really believe the Bible. But I'm fascinated at Genesis 22, where it says, "So Abraham arose the next morning and saddled the donkey." What went on that night? I don't know. Had Abraham come so far that he just knew that God could be trusted? And it wasn't a problem? If he did, then man, he's a whole lot farther down the road than I am. Karen tells me that Abraham did not tell Sarah what he was planning to do. And I said, "How do you know?" She said she wasn't lying in the road in front of the donkey. The Bible says Abraham believed in the resurrection. Well, why not? He had seen a 99-year-old woman get pregnant. What's so hard about raising the dead? But the point is, Abraham has taken the steps to quit being God in his life. That's what the covenant is about. That's where God was leading them to Sinai, where he could say to them, "I give myself to you. I'm your God. And I ask you to lay your life in my hands, trusting me, believing me, committed to obey me, whether you understand it or not." That's why the covenant is so critical to our Christian faith. That's why it's an old covenant and a new covenant. It's a covenant. And the new covenant doesn't replace the old, it fulfills it. And if I had a week, I'd tell you about that, but I don't. But this is what had happened to the Hebrew people. They had ceased being the covenant people and had fallen into a pagan way of dealing with God. And I want to say to you with every ounce of love I can muster, it's real easy for us to fall into that same mold. I'll serve you as long as you bless me, and I'll determine what the terms are. I'll determine what the blessing is. And if you produce, then you can be in the kitchen. But if you don't produce, God, you're on the back porch. I'll go to church as long as you do what I want you to do. But if you quit doing what I want you to do, don't expect to see me there anymore. That's what had happened to them. So, like last night, long introduction, but on purpose. Look now at chapter 2 of Malachi. Their covenant with God is in ruins because they've slipped into this pagan way of thinking. So guess what that means about the rest of their covenants? Now, one of the things about Bible study is look for repeated words. Normally, when we repeat ourselves, we're trying to make a point. Our youngest, Peter, had a constitutional objection to sitting down in the high chair. He figured he could get at it a whole lot easier if he was standing up. So I would regularly say, "Peter, sit down. Peter, sit down. Peter, sit, sit, sit." And he would look at me as though, "And your point is?" Well, God's the same way. He repeats himself when he's trying to make a point. Look at chapter 2 there. Look at verse 4. then you'll know I've sent this commandment to you, that my covenant with Levi may continue. Verse 5, my covenant was with him one of life and peace. Look now at verse 8. You have departed from the way. You've caused many to stumble at the Torah. I want to say something about that in a minute. You have corrupted the covenant of Levi. 3 times. The covenant of Levi. That's number 1. Now look at verse 10. Have we not all one Father? Has not one God created us? Why do we deal treacherously with one another by profaning the covenant of the fathers? That's 4. Verse 14. You say, why does God not bless me? Because the Lord has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, with whom you've dealt treacherously. Yet she is your companion and your wife by covenant. 5 times. Some versions will have 6. 5 times. Covenant, covenant, covenant. And guess what? 3 covenants, all 3 are broken. The covenant of Levi. This is the priests. Let's try a black one. The religious leadership, their covenant is broken. The covenant of the fathers, that refers to the people at large. And the covenant with the wife of your youth. Individuals. All of them broken. Now I think we can look at that 2 different ways. On the one hand, this is the symptom of their broken covenant with God. Because their covenant with God is broken, they can't keep their covenants with one another. Because they won't trust God. They can't dare be trustworthy to each other. But I also think it's a cause. In other words, this is the chicken and the egg thing. Because their covenants with one another are broken, their covenant with God is broken. So it's a question of which way it's moving, because their covenant with God is broken, their covenants with one another are broken. Because their covenants with one another are broken, their covenants with God, their covenant with God is broken. John, in his first letter, spells this out. Don't tell me you love God whom you've not seen when you hate your brother whom you have seen. It's a lot easier to love God than it is to love you. It's a lot easier to love God than to love some clod who throws his underwear on the floor. So he says you cannot separate your religious covenant from your life covenants. They go together. And if one is broken, don't be surprised if the other is broken. Okay, it's real quiet in here. Covenant with Levi. What in the world's going on there? Well, a little bit of Old Testament history here.